Welcome to the Refine and Shine, the podcast dedicated to mastering the art of continuous improvement and optimizing every aspect of your life. I'm Angelina Rivera, your host, and together we'll uncover the secrets to refining our lives, our habits, and our processes to unlock our inner brilliance. Join us on Refine and Shine, where we'll delve deep into achieving more in life without the burnout and without all the stress. This podcast is your platform for a more fulfilling life through continuous improvement and personal growth. In each episode, I and a diverse array of guests discuss practical strategies for up-leveling every aspect of your life. From developing good habits and organizing your space to refining your mindset and personal goals, we're going to explore it all. Our guests share personal stories about the systems they developed or systems they've used and the tweaks they've made in their lives when refinement was needed, allowing them to truly shine. Listen to Refine and Shine to learn how you can implement continuous improvement techniques in your daily routine, develop and maintain healthy habits that lead to success and satisfaction, organize your life to reduce the stress and increase your productivity, foster a growth mindset that propels you to new heights. My mission is to inspire you to take bold action, make positive changes, and become the best version of yourself. Whether you're aiming to elevate your career, nurture meaningful relationships, or enhance your overall well-being, Refine and Shine is your guiding light. With over 25 years of experience in continuous improvement, I help businesses streamline their processes, establish efficient work areas, and implement standard work protocols. I have trained over 600 individuals and teams in process improvement, optimizing workflows, and enhancing overall operational efficiency. Tune in every week as we embark on an enlightening journey, exploring paths to refinement and illuminating the way to shine in every area of our lives. Subscribe now and join us on this journey to polish your life and let your best self shine through. Thank you for joining us on Refine and Shine. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Refine and Shine podcast. As always, I always love to bring different people, a variety of people to my listeners, and I just love what my next guest has to share. She's amazing. Gabi is a coach, an author, a speaker, and a purpose activator. She is the host of Pain to Passion podcast. She's a complex trauma survivor. We're going to hear more about that. She is a trauma mama. She has spent years studying and applying various somatic-based healing modalities and believes it's both possible and imperative to continue to pursue your dreams while healing from your past. She's dedicated to creating a safe space for women and entrepreneurs to share their stories, heal from the inside out, and walk confidently in their unique callings. She also has journals and a coloring book that's super helpful tools for your healing journey. I just love that. So welcome, Gabi.
Thank you so much, Angelina. I'm so happy to be here.
So you specialize in trauma. And I would love for my listeners to know what exactly is your definition or you're based on your research, because you have certifications, this is your passion, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is trauma?
Yeah, that's such a good question, actually, because I think there's some confusion around that. Obviously, we all go through hard things, but trauma isn't actually the hard thing we go through. Trauma is the lack of a safe space to process and heal afterward. So if you don't have a safe place, say you're a kid who falls off your bike and breaks your leg, and your mom is kind and comforting and takes care of you, or you're a kid that falls off the bike and breaks your leg and your mom yells at you, says it's your fault, like that's going to become trauma. So that lack of safety is actually what creates those wounds inside of us that last a long time.
Well, that's so good. That's a really a good way to understand it, because some people always think that trauma is just like one significant event that has to happen, but it can be a series of things. It can be a series of little instances of things, of occurrences that have happened that can cause trauma.
Absolutely.
So, with all of that, what are some misconceptions that you've heard about trauma?
I think there is a common misconception that trauma survivors are somehow like overly sensitive or weak, or maybe they can't do or accomplish the things that people who aren't trauma survivors can do. When in fact, I have found that most of the trauma survivors that I have met are overachievers, they're perfectionists, they're like gung ho, trying to be the best in their field. Trauma doesn't necessarily break you down in the ways that society thinks it does. It often creates like a need to be the strongest in the room, not the weakest. So there's a lot of trauma survivors out there who are achieving great things, and you would never know unless you had a conversation with them, which is why I love working with entrepreneurs, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs who actually have a trauma history, and everyone deserves to have healing for that.
I think that's so important what you said is because there could be the ones that are the overachievers. They're trying to constantly prove because one, it could be a couple of things. One is that they could be trying to avoid the things that they need to heal from. And
Mhm,
they want to succeed and show people like, hey, I can do this no matter what you've said about me or what you've done to me and all those
mhm,
things. And then there's those who just really want to make a change for themselves and they want to change generations and change, all the
mhm.
things that have happened. And I think that's so important. And know that you said something about, that they're the higher achievers and things like that. So, to what type of work do you do with since you love working with entrepreneurs, what is the type of work that you do to help entrepreneurs with trauma or people in
So
general?
yeah, people in general, but I do love entrepreneurs. I work with women specifically, but what I love about entrepreneurs is a lot of us got into entrepreneurship actually as a response to our trauma. We may not realize it, but it's our way of controlling something. And trauma survivors often have to have that feel like they're in control. Um, but once we get into it, the symptoms of trauma may end up hindering us, which for me, I work a lot with my clients on nervous system regulation specifically, because the result of trauma is often a dysregulated nervous system. And what that means in like layman's terms would be anxiety, procrastination, getting distracted, imposter syndrome, all these things that block us from being able to move forward and really push past the roadblocks that seem to be getting in our way. So oftentimes if an entrepreneur can heal from their past and also learn how to regulate their nervous system, they can overcome like the ceiling that they've hit in their business because it's actually a very real feeling in their bodies, of course, but it's a trauma symptom, that nervous system dysregulation that's keeping them from feeling the ease and feeling the ability and clarity to move forward in their businesses.
Oh, I love that. So I teach others. I teach about time blocking and time
Mhm,
management and things like that. And what we also focus on is, if we're distracted or we're avoiding behavior, procrastinating on things, what is it and what's the clarity that you need to do from that? And I have them like journal and
mhm.
get do some clarity on that. And you help them not only deal with, with the clarity, but like how to heal their bodies and relax their bodies. Would that be correct?
Yes. So anyone who's listening can remember a time where you felt anxious. And if you could like close your eyes and think about being anxious, you could probably point at a spot in your body where you feel that. Often it's like tightness in your stomach or tightness in your shoulders, or maybe you like close in on yourself. That is your body responding to a trigger. And a lot of the time, we try to overcome that by changing how we're thinking or by like saying certain mantras and things like that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It definitely can be helpful, but if we overlook actually addressing the pain that we're experiencing, the discomfort that we're experiencing in our bodies, it's going to be much harder to move through that. And what I find also with entrepreneurs a lot is like, but I've done all the mindset hacks. I feel like I should be past procrastination right now. And I explain like your body feels under threat. And when your body feels under threat, it's going to stop you from pursuing the thing that it sees as a threat. So it's teaching our bodies new senses of safety in new situations. Like, you're safe here. Let me show you that you're safe here in very small and easy to swallow ways until what's called your window of tolerance gets larger. So your window of tolerance is basically the space in which you can feel calm and clear-headed. And we want to grow that because for a lot of us, that's a small space. And the only way to grow that is like by keeping one foot in that calm and peaceful place and putting one foot out into a space that's new and just stretching it a little bit. And as you do that, your window of tolerance will get bigger and bigger, so you're able to do more things while you actually feel safe inside of your body. But if you jump from like, I want to write a book to I have to write 6 hours a day, for example, that's going to be way too big for your nervous system and you'll end up shutting down. It'll actually end up being worse for yourself. So it's really a partnership, like a compassionate partnership with your body to move through those feelings of being stuck in a gentle way.
Oh, that's so interesting. And how did you get into this type of work?
Ah, that's one of my favorite questions. I actually got into it because of my son. I have a beautiful 11-year-old son who is adopted, and we adopted him 10 years ago. And I knew nothing about trauma at that point. Like, I knew that I had had a difficult upbringing, but I would have never really explored the idea of trauma and how it affects you. But when he came home, he had a trauma history already, and I had to learn really quick what that meant for him and for me. And I realized pretty quickly that he and I had very similar woundings. Like, we had attachment disruptions, both of us. And I was the adult in the situation. So I was like, okay, I'm the one that needs to really heal and move through this so that I can parent this kid. Because otherwise, we're going to butt heads and we're going to keep hurting each other. And he deserves a safe space to grow up. So I dove deep, not only in healing my own stuff, but also learning about attachment theory, learning about connection, learning how the brain is wired differently when you experience trauma. And like, the last 10 years is just history, basically. It's what I mean, I dove headfirst and learned from some of the best in the trauma informed world. And I fell in love with it because it's a beautiful way of communicating with other human beings. I think trauma-informed work is really just human work. It's how we're supposed to be engaging with each other in order to have healthy relationships and not wound each other. Um, but yeah, I always credit my son for getting me into this work, and I'm so grateful for the healing that he has experienced and myself, and now being able to share that as my calling with others. Yeah.
I love that. We sometimes we don't even know like the passion that you have behind something like that it was because of your son. It's something
Mhm.
because, the journey of adoption is one like commend you for that because a lot of people don't look outside their home to when they want children to go and just go into the adoption space. So thank you for that. And just learning to because your son needed help and you went and figured out the resources and dug into the research and did all the work so that not only could you help him so that you could become a better parent or and parent him to the way that he needed it to be have a parent, but that you also learned how to heal and work on yourself is so important.
Mhm.
And so, with all of that being said, like, what is the types of work? I mean, you talked about how you go through and with the body and the nervous system. And so, what is it that you do? You help them. What type of work? What type of options do you give for your people? Like, do you do one-on-one coaching?
Yeah.
How does it work?
Yeah, so right now my focus is one-on-one coaching. What I love about the one-on-one space is it's so customizable depending on the person. All of us have different experiences. I do group coaching as well. It's different. It's a different experience, but you can also learn from the other people in your group. So there's pros and cons. But the individual coaching is where most of my focus is right now. And I go through a process called STORY, STORY. The S is stands for safety. And that's really what we've talked a lot about already. Safety is understanding your nervous system and what it feels like in your body to be safe. Because if you don't even know what that means or how to access it, like you're not going to be able to move forward. Safety is the key to healing and forward movement. So that's like the basics. Then we move into the T, which is therapeutic intervention. And in that space, I will have each individual map their nervous systems in a specific way so they can see on paper what's happening inside of their bodies. And then we create an emergency toolkit. It's like a first aid kit for your nervous system. So like a first aid kit, you could grab a Band-Aid and put it on a cut. That's going to be the same except for your nervous system. Here's something you can reach for. You know what it is, grab it and help yourself feel better in the moment. It's not going to heal the deep wounds, but it will help you feel better and feel safe in that moment so you can move forward. After that is when we really get into like actual healing work. So the O part of story is owning your story. And we do timeline work, trauma-informed timeline work. It's really cool how the body works, but this work actually connects your right and left brain together. And what that means is that your feelings will understand where they came from in time. Because a lot of the times when we're triggered or activated or feeling anxious, it's because our body is responding to input that it's experienced in the past, but in the past it was dangerous. Maybe now it's not, but in the past it was. And you don't have a concept in your feelings of time. So when you connect your right and left brains, you're connecting your feelings to time. So basically what that does in this work is it calms the triggers in your timeline so you can start feel more regulated more often. We'll also do some trauma-informed narrative work where you write stories from your life and share them in an attuned space. The story work is really, really powerful. It's very healing for your inner child, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of inner child work. It's like a catchphrase on social media. But all of the purpose of that is to deactivate the triggers that are triggering you most often. After that, we move into the R, where we talk about relationships. That's a lot of standards and boundaries work, where we see who you are specifically and what you need in relationships, and define boundaries and standards in a way that maybe you have never done before. So you can be really clear on how to move forward in your relationships. And then at the very end is the why, which I call you being you. And this is where you get to discover like, who you really are. What are you passionate about? What makes you angry? Why does that matter? And get a clear picture of who you're created to be, maybe for the first time as an adult, or maybe the first time ever. After all that healing work, you can have a lot more clarity and insight into who you really are.
I think that's amazing. I think it's so many things that you cover can help anyone. It doesn't
Mm,
necessarily have to be somebody pursuing a business or an entrepreneur. It's just so many
absolutely.
women, particularly because that's who you help. So this is particularly for women, have things that they may have been triggers, like you said, triggers, and that have happened to them, or they can hear somebody talking and in that tone of voice it'll take them back to
Mm,
something a long time ago, and they get anxious, but not really knowing, why am I feeling anxious about the way that
mhm.
this person's talking to me when they've never hurt me? Because your body's in that fight or flight type of situation
Yeah.
because of something. I never realized that your brain doesn't understand timelines with the feelings that
Mm.
you can have. That's amazing. Um, we talked a lot about triggers, but if my audience doesn't really understand what a trigger is, could you define what you consider a trigger?
Yeah, so a trigger can be any kind of sensory input. So something you see, smell, hear, taste, touch that will put your system into fight or flight mode. So, like you said, it could be someone's tone of voice, it could be the way someone looks at you. I work with a lot of moms, so a lot of us who grew up in maybe not the healthiest situations will be triggered by our kids acting in specific ways because it feels alarming to us. So anything that you experience around you that's incoming that causes you to feel anxious or depressed or any of those feelings, that's what a trigger is.
It's like, if we feel like we're walking on eggshells talking to somebody and like
Yeah.
the egg is about to crack.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
So you have talked about the different healing modalities that you use. Which one do you find is particular helpful, or do you just use all of them through
Well,
your program?
I use a mishmash
Okay.
of modalities, something that I very much learned that is important for trauma survivors is to have some kind of somatic work. And what somatic means is embodied. So it's getting your body involved, not just talk therapy, not just mindset work, but actually involving your body. So everything I described in like the process that I used is some kind of somatic modality. So there's somatic experiencing, which will be specific ways to identify and reduce triggers in the moment. It's a whole spectrum of work, and I only do a small part of it as part of my work, but somatic experiencing is a great place for people to look into if they're needing healing from trauma. I've also done something called lifespan integration, which is similar to the timeline work that I do with my clients. If you've heard of EMDR, it's kind of like EMDR and how it works with your brain. But like I was saying earlier, it connects the two sides of your brain. Um, by getting you involved in feeling, you feel in your body, you wear different parts of your story, like flash, basically, and where those feelings arise, and you focus on that feeling and deactivate it. So it's all in the body. Um, so those are a couple of my favorite modalities is somatic experiencing and lifespan integration. There are other somatic things that we do, which are like inner child work, journaling, things like that, that are included. So I don't focus on just one, but if anyone's looking for a practitioner, there are specific practitioners as well that focus on those things solely, like somatic experiencing, lifespan integration, EMDR, those kinds of modalities.
I think that's important is that you don't just specify and focus on one thing because everybody is unique. Everybody has
Mhm,
different things that they need to help them heal, and that you take like what you said earlier about different tools in the toolbox.
mhm.
That you can pull from so that you can help them with their healing work. When we talk about your one-on-one clients that you do, what is the time frame and how long do you take to work with them? Do you have like just a certain amount of weeks that you work with them? How does that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, I do 12 weeks. So the program is set up for 12 weeks. Usually we're able to complete the program in 12 weeks. Sometimes people want further help after that. So I do offer further help, but it's good to have like a start and an end. That's one
Mhm.
of the differences between coaching and therapy. It's like in coaching, you have a specific goal in mind and you're working towards that goal. So for us, we do put that within a 12-week period where we meet once a week for 45 minutes.
I like that you said what it's the difference between coaching and therapy because that was one going to be my next question is what was the difference? And with
Mm,
therapy, there's no end in sight. Like you're just going to keep talking and talking and
mhm,
talking, and maybe getting a few tools and things like that. But with coaching, you have a plan, you have
mhm,
goals, you have an outcome that you're working to achieve, and I think
mhm.
that's so important. Um, with anybody when you're whatever you're doing is that when you hire a coach that you make sure you have goals set up in place or
Mhm.
you work with that coach to get your goals set up so that you have an end goal so to speak. I think that's so
Yeah,
important.
yeah, for sure.
So how has sharing your personal story and hearing the stories of others helped you in your
Mm.
own healing process?
Oh, goodness. You're speaking my language right now that you're using my favorite word, story, which you guys have already heard me say. But I think sharing your story can be one of the most powerful and healing things that you can experience. Now, there's a caveat on that is it has to be done in the right places at the right times, right? Not everywhere is safe to just share your story. But even therapeutically, because I've been in therapy for years now. I believe in it. I think it's important. Therapeutically, being able to share my story in a safe space first was probably one of the most healing things I ever experienced because I was met with kindness, I was met with understanding, and I was reflected back to like, oh, that wasn't okay, or I see you. And being seen and heard and understood are like the most basic needs that we have. From there, I've been able to share pieces of my story in public spaces. And that's been so cool too, because it's almost like you take off a mask and you show up completely as you, not ashamed of your history, not ashamed of who you are, where you're coming from. And when you can do that to like show up authentically, I think that's one of the most healing things any of us can experience as well. As far as hearing other people's stories, I mean, I just get so moved by the resilience of human beings, to be honest. I've heard some very heartbreaking things spoken by some of the most beautiful, powerful people I've ever met. And there's so much hope in that. There's so much hope in hearing other people's stories, knowing like we can overcome and we can heal. And when you're in a dark space, hearing the stories of others who have been through something similar can be like that glimmer that you hold on to of like, okay, I'm gonna make it through. So yeah, I think stories are my favorite. Stories are so powerful. I absolutely love them.
I love what you said is that, hearing, being able to release it first in a safe space and how freeing it is. And you mentioned like taking off the mask. It's like
Mhm.
peeling an onion, like you have layers and we've built up all these layers to make ourselves look like a perfect person when we really all of us have these stories and all of these
Mhm.
have healing work that needs to be done and we need to peel the layers off in order to show up authentically as who we are.
Mhm.
And it's not easy, and it's something that we have to make sure that we're in a trusted safe space. But
Mhm.
what a freeing feeling it is. I know that, you know starting this podcast, I was very scared to start my podcast because
Mhm.
as I was like, I got things to say, but I was scared to say the things that I had to say. But man, it feels so good to share things that have happened. And it's not to put shame and say that I had a horrible life. It's just that there are things that have hurt me or there's things that I've
Yeah.
been through. And you can still use your story to help others too. Like don't like if when you're holding it down and keeping it within, you're not only hurting yourself, you're damaging your body because our bodies react to the stress, um, but you can help others by sharing your lessons that you've learned, I think is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, when you do finally, I'm sure you've experienced this, but when you do finally share and you hear someone else say, "Oh my gosh, me too," that's so validating of like, "Oh, I'm not alone. I'm not weird. This is something that someone else has experienced too." Like that's one of the most powerful aspects of stories as well. So it is really powerful to be able to say, "Me too," and just connect with other people who have experienced similar things.
I'm sure that when you first, when you go up on stages and because you're a speaker and you've shared your story, I mean, how many times have you heard that? Like me too, or you've connected with somebody that you probably were sitting next to the whole time or walked by them and wasn't until you got up on stage to speak they really connected.
Yeah, I mean, everything from Instagram posts to speaking on stage, I hear "me too" all the time, and I think the most disarming thing about it is it's often from people you wouldn't expect for them to say "me too," like, the ones that are really put together, super successful, and then they'll say, "You spoke right to me, like, this was my experience." It's it's really amazing and affirming, and knowing that we're not alone, like, in this world, in our experience, it's just incredibly healing.
So you have a coloring book and you have
Yeah.
journals and all these things. Like, what made you start those things, those items?
Well, the journal that one of the journals, the soul care journal,
Mhm.
that's like my main journal. It's 50 days of prompts. I'm very visual, and I didn't see any journals that had like a visual aid. And I wanted people to experience journaling because it really is a very impactful and healing tool, but a lot of people don't know where to start. Like you sit down with a pencil and a blank notebook and you're like, what am I supposed to say? How is this supposed to affect me? So I put specific prompts in that journal to answer. So questions to answer. Some of them are really silly. Some of them are very deep, like what is the saddest thing that ever happened to you? Or things like that. But there's a picture to go along with each so that you can feel the emotion of the question. And that helps you engage in the journaling process. So really, it was just one of those things I was like, I should create this because I haven't seen anything like this out there for the journal. For the coloring book, it was kind of a fluke, to be honest. I went through a season where I just had to do stuff with my hands to feel better. It is somatic to get stuff out on paper. And I've never considered myself an artist or anything like that, but words specifically are very powerful to me. So I put the powerful words on paper in design, and I was like, oh, this could really be useful for other people to have these words in a book or on their wall as well. And it's been really cool actually to hear people's feedback about the coloring book and how like they'll be feeling really stressed and they'll sit down with the coloring book, coloring words like you are enough, and helping them to calm and regulate and feel better and remind themselves of the truth. So yeah, kind of random, but really, really fun. I do love to write and create healing resources for people.
What I think about that it's so important is that people will just getting the words out. And sometimes we get stuck and we look at a blank notebook, but just writing things out. And the difference between, I was talking to somebody the other day and I'm like, I really want, I'm a good, like, I need a journal.
Mhm.
And they're like, well, I was like, I'm almost out of my journal. Well, just use your phone. It's not the same.
No.
Putting that pen to paper
Mhm.
is so freeing, and just free writing or, answering the prompts or just thinking of, questions or reading a Bible verse or whatever it is that you and just writing about it or whatever your feelings. I feel that it's such a freeing thing to just
Mhm.
write. And
Yeah.
I think that for young adults, it's something that I think they struggle with because they're so used to just typing on their phone. We submit, through the technology age, they submit all their work through the computer or things like that. And you just writing in a notebook is just such a beautiful thing, and like a
Mhm.
journal and things like that. I think it helps with clarity as well. I think
Yeah,
it's
I
just a
agree.
passionate way. And with your podcast, when you got into your podcast, how did you get into that podcast and what was your purpose?
Well, it started because I was doing lives on Instagram, just interviewing people about their stories.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, people are enjoying this, and I would like for these stories to be more permanent, like permanently stored somewhere." So I shifted it into the podcast, and like you, I was so nervous. I had no idea what I was doing, but it ended up being not only powerful for sharing other people's stories, but powerful for connection for myself as well. You've probably found already that when you have a podcast, you really get to talk to a bunch of cool people.
Mhm.
And so just creating a network of people in my space was such an amazing experience. I've been on hiatus from the podcast for a bit, but it is starting back up this fall. Yay. But yeah, I think it's one of the most overlooked tools as far as networking goes. Um, and it's really just incredible and a privilege to hear so many stories from so many different perspectives. But again, it was one of those things that was kind of just like, I'm doing my thing, and this is the natural progression
Mhm.
of what happens next with that thing that I'm doing. So, yeah,
What I love about that is that, there's so many podcasts out there, but yours is about like the pain. It's what's it, pain to
pain
passion?
to passion life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is that so many people like they're like, oh, another podcast or another like, and that's what I had that fear. Like, I'm not gonna do another
Mm,
podcast. I wanted to do a podcast, but then I was like, so many others are, but we all have our unique perspectives on it, and we're
hmm.
sharing stories, and the outlook and the way that we take it is just so it's such a beautiful thing. And I think that the thing is you didn't stop yourself from doing what you needed to do, and you felt that these stories were important and you should share them. And that's kind of what I was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna do it." I was like, "No, I got stuff to say. I need
Mhm.
to, use it." And I find that I'll just sit there one day and I'll just think about something and I'm like, "I'm gonna do a podcast on that," and I'll do a solo cast or
Yeah.
something. It's just a freeing thing, and it's from my journaling work is the
Mhm.
things that I sometimes will talk to on my podcast, and I think that that's important as well.
That's super cool.
I think it's important that we have multiple ways that we can speak to everybody as well, because your coloring book or your journaling book maybe for the person who's not ready to deal with the healing work that they need to deal with, and
Yeah.
that's just the first step. Maybe listening to the podcast is the second step, and then they were like, I really need to connect with her and get that
Mhm.
healing work done. And I think that we have to meet the people where they're at, and you have so many great tools and resources to help meet the people where they're at. And I think that's so
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that's my hope for sure.
So what is next? Your podcast is going to be coming up. You're going to restart that. I mean, I know that we have to have seasons where we take a break because it's so important to our healing. It's not to get burnout.
Mhm.
But what is your next steps and what's your goals and dreams for your business?
Oh, goodness. How much time do you have?
You have time.
Well, the past year has been just on a personal level, it's been wild. I've gone through a divorce in the past year, which is part of the reason why I put the podcast on hold because you can't just do everything. Um, but I have really, really loved connecting more with moms and special needs moms and adoptive moms, because a lot of us really do have a lot of healing to do. So I have been focusing a bit more on the motherhood space, um, or the mompreneur space, because we're trying to do it all. You understand how that is, Angelina.
Yeah.
My hopes would actually be to start having events, like small healing events. I don't want to have big conferences. I don't want to have hundreds of people. I want a space where each individual can have an impactful experience and a healing experience. So I've been doing my research for retreats and things like that. 2025 is the goal to start doing those intimate healing events, but that would be like the next big progression of my business for sure.
I think that's so important because when you're in a big space, conferences, hundreds of people, you're going to sit in the back. Or if you're not ready to do the work, you're going to be too scared to go up and talk to somebody
Mhm.
or get the help that you need. And it's going to take some work. But when you're in a safe space, smaller, intimate group, you can release and let your guard down, so to speak. And that's a safe
Mhm.
space that you may need to really just let go of all the things that have been blocking you and hindering you. I think
Yeah.
that's so important. I love that. I think that that's going to be amazing. And I can't wait to hear about it because I'm sure you're going to find a beautiful place and it's going to be amazing. And you're going to have so many activities to really help people heal. And that's what
Mhm.
we need. I think that that's so important. And it's not going to be, it's the next level of things that you and like you could even pull your oh, I'm just thinking all these things. I think that's so exciting. I'm like, I'm gonna help you plan it out.
Yay, let's do it.
And that's something like, eventually I always tell my husband, I'm like, I want to do retreats, I want to do this, I want to do that. He goes, you can't do it all. I'm like, yeah, I can.
Mhm.
Watch me.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, it doesn't have to happen today, but I'm gonna
Mhm.
do
Oh,
it.
sorry.
No, you're fine. I wanna do that. I think it's so important because God gave us our minds and our brains to create, and we're really like He pulls things into our lives so that we're passion that our passions are and our strengths. And if we can help others, I think that's so important. And if
Mhm.
we can create that space, because there's millions of people out there who need healing. There's millions of
Mhm.
people out there who need the tools that we can give them. They just got to understand that they need to say yes to themselves first, right?
Yeah.
Yes to doing the healing work. Yes to, whatever they need. They just need to say yes to themselves. And I think that
Mhm.
that's so hard for women to understand. And so, um, as we wrap up, well, in just a bit, would you say to the mom out there or the woman out there who's listening and is too scared to get the healing work, or what could you do to help them convince themselves that all the stress that they're holding on to. It's causing their body's pain. It's causing all this discomfort and why they need to do the healing work.
Well, first of all, I would say I get it. I understand. There's nothing wrong with you. And really getting to that space in yourself where you can say that to yourself. There's so much, women fall into so many shame traps of like, I'm not good enough, or I should have done this, I should have done that. Where if we meet ourselves with compassion instead, almost like you're caring for yourself as a child, like, it's okay, honey. The way you feel makes sense. How can we make it feel better? That's the best place for you to start is with yourself. Like, how can I be compassionate with myself? As far as the courage to do the next piece of your healing, like that's going to come with time. And I never would force anybody to do anything. That's like the opposite of trauma informed work.
Mhm.
Having your autonomy and being able to make choices for yourself is very, very important. So I would say do the research, get on a connection call. I offer a free connection call, for example, and I never pressure people to buy anything on those calls. My hope would be that someone can have the courage to meet with me and feel like liberated to take the next step for themselves. So find spaces that feel safe enough for you and take the next step into that space and know that you have autonomy over your choices after that. You don't have to say yes. You don't have to say no. You don't have to make any decisions that don't feel right for you. But you can't make any decisions at all if you don't take a step forward and take that risk on yourself. I'll also say that healing work is hard, but healing work is so worth it. When I look back at where me and my kids were 8 years ago compared to now, I thank God every day because it's a miracle and it's beautiful where we are now. We're thriving. My kids are emotionally healthy. I'm healthy. We have a healthy relationship with each other. And that is worth everything. It's worth all of the effort, all of the work, all of the time, all of the money. Like, all of it is so worth it to be able to be in a space where I can wake up in the morning and I don't feel anxious. And I can enjoy my children and not feel triggered by them. So that was a really long answer, but just being kind to yourself and doing the next right thing, knowing that you have autonomy. Remind yourself all the time, I'm an adult. I can make these decisions for myself and not feeling forced into anything.
I think that that's so important. And one of the things that you said is that when you don't wake up anxious anymore. You
Hmm.
don't wake up. And I know that there are so many people out there who wake up and the first thing that they feel is anxiety
Mm.
as soon as they wake up. And I know that we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but could you tell me, how did you get to the point where you do not feel anxious anymore when you
Mm.
wake up?
Yeah, I wish that there was a step one, step two, step three
Right.
thing, but honestly, it's because somatic work, the embodied therapeutic work that I've done, actually heals you. So instead of feeling those triggers all the time, I feel at home in my own body. And the things that used to trigger me don't anymore. Of course, I'm human. I still get triggered. I still get angry. I still get anxious. But overall, I'm just a much more peaceful, calm person. But it's because the wounds have actually healed. I don't just have tools to help myself feel better. I'm actually healed. And knowing that that's possible is often so hopeful for a lot of people because you've felt this way your whole life. And
Mhm.
knowing that maybe there's a day that you can wake up and not feel that way anymore is is amazing and it's possible.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that that's so good. And if any of my listeners are out there and you're waking up with that anxiety, or you're waking, you have that stress and that she talked about it earlier, that just anxiety in your stomach, that pit in your stomach that's hurting, think about it. Think about taking that call with her, and you offer that free call and just seeing if if you guys can work together, because I think it's so important. We have to do the work in
Mhm.
order for us to show up every day. And if we don't take care of ourselves, it's not good, because we show up every day and we give ourselves to our children. If we're married, we give it to our spouses and all that, and we put ourselves last. And that's one of the things I always tell my people when they're scheduling their time. You are the most important person. You have to schedule time for yourself
Yeah.
and your family first, and then you fit everything else in. That's so important to balance your life, and it will really go a long way. And do the healing work. It's so freeing to feel with feel one within your body, to love
Mhm.
your body and feel one within it. So how can my listeners follow you, or what's the best way to contact you?
Well, I love Instagram. I hang out on Instagram a lot. I try to give practical tools there. So if you want to follow me, my handle is Gabi Ruth, GABIRUTH. I also have a website, gabiruth.com. I show up on TikTok every now and then. But mostly if you can connect to my Instagram, it'll link you everywhere else. So that's probably the best way.
And on the website, her website is where you can order that amazing journal, the coloring book, all the things. So do that as well. They make perfect stocking stuffers for Christmas. Think about that as well, or just buy a bunch of them, and then when you have your girls get together for whatever tea or whatever you do, um, give those as gifts. I mean, I think they're really precious. They're important, and I think they're so helpful to others. So think about that as well. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on and providing my listeners with some actionable things, and allowing them to hear what you had to share and see if they have to do the healing work, that they can connect with you. And I
Of
know many of
course.
them out there need to do the healing work. And so I hope there's a connection soon.
Thank you for creating this space for it, Angelina.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Refine and Shine. We hope you find valuable insights and inspiration to fill your journey of continuous improvement. Remember, the key to success lies in refining your processes and letting your inner brilliance shine. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback is greatly appreciated and helps us reach more listeners like you who are eager to refine and shine in all areas of life. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and additional resources and behind the scenes content. We love hearing from our listeners, so feel free to reach out with any suggestions, questions, or success stories you'd like to share. As we wrap up, remember that the power to transform your life lies within you. Keep striving for growth, embracing change, and seeking opportunities to refine your skills. Together, let's continue to shine bright and make a positive impact in the world. Until next time, keep refining and keep shining.